Greetings, everyone. Pete Pardo here from Sea of Tranquility. Welcome to the December edition of 4Fusion Friday. It's the first Friday of the month. This is our final episode of 2023. And we've got a fun show for you here today. As always, we got a special guest. He's back once again, Mr. Colin Beckham. What's going on, Colin?
How are you? Doing well.
Good.
Doing well.
Glad
to be here. It's an honor
to have you. And before we get started, let me introduce the two pillars of the show here, Mr. George Lamie and Mr. Eric Porter. What's up, guys?
Come on, boys.
How's it going?
Another tough month here. Another 4 spectacular picks. George, you do it to us each and every
Killing
month.
us.
Each and every month.
Statistic streak.
Yeah, you know. George, Golden Pumpkin, what do you got tonight?
Oh,
I got the other pumpkin one. What is that?
Pumpkin Spice, I guess.
Pumpkin spice.
I have turned George onto Republic of Tea. He is now a convert. It's all I drink. So
Good stuff.
yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. All right, George, I'll turn it over to you and you can drive the show.
Super light new release segment this week. I only got one thing. Yannick Wisdala, Night Watch.
Mhm.
It's the 8th album from a London-born bassist. It's a trio album. I would say I'm enjoying like half of it. It's kind of got a split personality. There's some eclectic kind of tracks and then some more mellow stuff. I'm just getting used to it, so it's kind of hard to say exactly where I stand. Piano player Tom Cawley, piano and keyboards, and drummer Cliff Almond. Cliff Almond, I know he's played with Michelle Camillo amongst others. Real good player. But yeah, that's I believe that's a Bandcamp if people want to check it out. Yannick Wisdala, Night Watch. That's all I got.
And we'll, of course, list that down in the comments below so you guys can go check that out.
Really good bass player. All right, let's hit the square. We hadn't done a self-titled debut albums in quite a while.
Okay.
And there was an album or two here that we were angling to talk about anyway, so it just kind of worked out. So the 4 in the square alphabetically are Crosswind, 1978, Gamalon, 1987, Helmet of Gnats, 1996, and Marriage Material, 2021. 4 pretty different bands, but we'll see how it all turns out. We like to kick these things off with Mr. Eric. What is your number 4?
well, I gotta admit, I've had some trouble. I've been wavering this month a lot, but with number 4, I'm going with, unfortunately, I don't want to say my hometown, but I'm going with Gamalon at number 4. And I have a little backstory for Gamalon. So when you sent the 4 square, my head's kind of going. And Gamalon may be, or probably is, the first fusion band I ever saw live. They played at my college. I went to SUNY Potsdam. They're from the Rochester, Buffalo area of New York. And I did go back and read some of their backstory, and it sounds like a few of the members were actually in a progressive band in the 70s called Rodan. That apparently they opened for Genesis in Buffalo. I can't remember the year. I don't know if it was the Lamb tour. But I did go back and do some research on them. And for some reason, when you sent that, I didn't have the CD, but I saw Gamalon. I'm like, I know I saw these guys. And I was trying to, we get old, we get the olds. So I was trying to think where I saw them. They played at my school. So I wasn't happy that I put them at 4. And I think this might be a little prejudiced. Probably the only reason they were at 4 is that it's a very 80s sounding record in terms of the production. The guitars, they're very compressed. A lot of chorusy sound in that guitar sound that they use. But I've got to say, number 4 does not mean don't go check this out, because there's some terrific playing. I think there's 2 guitar players. So I was having actually when I was going back and listening to this, I was trying to figure out which guy is doing what. So I think it's Bruce Piccato and George Paluio are the guitar players, and there's 2 brothers, Ted and Tom Reinhardt, who bass and drums. So and I know these guys played for a long time. They actually, it sounds like they reformed. I think their releases went from, this was 87, and they had a bunch of releases into the mid 90s, and it sounds like they reformed again in the 2000s and played, I want to say, through maybe like 2014, 2015, they were actually still doing gigs. But there's some terrific stuff on this. You know, take the 80s production aside, it's not anything that's going to deter you from checking these guys out. Again, I always seem to get hit with the openers, so I'm going to go with Billy's Saloon is one of my favorite tunes that really kicks things off. It's a lot of very prominent bass work, that bass sound. It's very distinctive, I think, from that time period, and really nice guitar. The only problem I had with this, we always talk about the sequencing, and that Ooh Babe, as great as the guitar stuff is, and that just kind of brings things to a little bit of a halt. And I'm sure, George, you'll have, you know, with that title right away, you see Ooh Babe and you're like, oh no, what are they doing? But it's actually there's a lot of great guitar work in that. Black Licorice is probably the other one that really stood out to me. Terrific tune. And going towards the end of the album, Souvenirs was another one that had some really great piano, really good rocker. I really like these guys. And we always say that. I feel bad putting them at 4. I wanted to kind of hang my hometown heroes up a little bit, but terrific record. I think it's, you know, it's probably of its time a little bit, but just some great stuff. And again, the guitar work is fantastic. So that's always my focal point when I'm listening to this stuff, but really good stuff. Check it out if you can. But I'm going to go with Gamalon at number 4.
Where are you at, Cone?
Yeah, I'm going to go with Gamelon at number 4 as well. If you had asked me a week or 2 ago, there's another one of these that probably would have been number 4, but it's been a grower since I've been digging in, and so it rose above Gamelon. I think for a lot of the reasons that Eric has mentioned. It is very much of its time, and it's 2 guitars, bass, and drums, right? Pretty much. So one of the things that I was trying to sort out which guitarist was playing which part, and there's a lot of overlapping. They're both lead players, and they don't really divide up into rhythm and lead all that much from what I can tell. And they're both great players. And this is a great album. Like Eric said, it's a great fusion album. But something's got to be at number 4, and for the reasons that he kind of outlined, this is going to go there. I first heard this 15, 20 years ago. My friend Rob turned me on to it, and this one, and I think their second one as well. And I gave them a lot of listens back then and pulled them out a few weeks ago for this show. So it was nice to revisit them, and they're definitely worth hearing and worth having. So the song Ooh Babe, man, that just the title alone, struggled with that a little bit too.
Oh, and I thought of George immediately. I'm listening to the first song.
Yeah. I'm like, I can just hear him now. There's no vocals though.
It's true.
But it's a great album. It's the only one that we're talking about where there's 2 guitarists, I think, right? So that alone, I like to hear a little bit more variety, in instrumentation, and the other bands there's a little more balance between the various instruments in the other records that we're going to talk about. So yeah, number 4, but still killer album, great band.
You gonna keep it going, Pete, or what?
Well, I will say this was another tough assignment, and all 4 of these are really, really good. Ultimately, for my number 4, I went with Marriage Material. which was really the only one that I hadn't. It was absolutely brand spanking new to me. I'd never even heard of this band before, but they're pretty new. So it's, that makes sense that probably they kind of just skipped by me a couple of years ago. And this is the one I think that's the most different out of all of them. But there's great playing on this album. You got this guy Thomas Steiger on bass, who's amazing. Felix Lehrman is an amazing drummer, and I'm almost more impressed with the drumming on this album than anything else. And I'm not a drummer. I very rarely focus on drums at all. But man, the drums on this whole album are just so impressive. But you have a factor on this album that makes it really different. You got a guy playing vibes throughout the whole album, and he's very, very prominent on the album, and that's pretty unique. However, about halfway through the album, it started to wear on me a little bit. And I think that's the one reason why this one sits at my number 4. But that being said, he's a great player. The guitar player is also really, really good. Arto Michaela. And there's some really good songs on here. Tony's Tears is really wild. It's amazing. That's the cool thing about this album. I think in the beginning of the album, I was totally taken by this whole guitar, bass, drums, and vibes. And I'm like, this is really different. But it's a really long album. There's a lot of songs. And by the end, I was kind of like, all right, a little too much vibes for me. A little vibes for me goes a long way. But there's some great stuff on here. Remy Problemi is very, very cool. Happy to Be Forced is another really good one. Turned is really good. All that being said, I think the guitar work is stellar. He's a really, really good player. The drums are absolutely outstanding. Again, I just have to stress that because I don't normally freak out over drummers, but this guy is really, really good. And I think give this a lot of props for being really, really unique for what it is. I think it was a really inspired choice, George, because it's something totally different. We've never really looked at it and talked about an album quite like this, but it's really cool. It's just my least favorite by a little bit, I think, but it's still really, really good. And I would really recommend anybody to check this out because it is so different. If you like the vibes, this is the album for you.
All right. Number 4 is Crosswind. Was number 3 most of the time leading up to this, but one snuck ahead the last week or so. I'm the newest to this. I came across this over the summer. Our friend Ken secured some copies of it on CD, and he let us all know. And Pete's the only guy smart enough to pick them up. It's good. It's very 70s fusion. It's a Japanese band, similar to the Japanese bands of the time, like Space Circus and Prism, 2 bands that are going to be in upcoming squares, by the way. But yeah, it's every bit as good as those. My favorite tunes are Great Movement of Ant and Long Rail. Those are the main jamming tunes. This guitar player has got a rocked up tone like you've never heard, man. This guy, he's got all kinds of gain on. I mean, it sounds incredible. And he's a good player. Genji Ogawa, really good player. The reason this is 4 is there are a couple songs. Ice, I think, is over long at almost 10 minutes. It's pleasant, but it's not knocking my socks off. And in the evening binge is kind of a sleepy ballad that I could probably do without, but like everybody said, something's got to be 4, and surprisingly, it's this and not my number 3, which did manage to move up. So Crosswind, my number 4. Eric?
Well, this was again where my confusion was with my number 3 and my number 2. But I'm going with Marriage Material at number 3. And George, you had sent me this a while back. This was something I got from you. And I love the vibes. And I think that's probably why you sent it to me, because I know I was talking about Zappa, and that's kind of Zappa was probably my first exposure to something where you kind of had a rock thing going, but you had the vibes going. Love the sound. And I think is it Raphael Meinhardt is the vibe player, and Pete mentioned, is it Arto Makila is the guitar player. The guitar on this is incredible too. Yeah. But I think Pete made this point, and I think I felt the same way. This was a tough one to listen from start to finish. It's a long record.
Really.
And I think it did kind of wear on me a little bit. In terms of, it's not that it's samey, but it's just that after a while, I think had this been maybe 10 or 11 songs versus what does it end up? Is it 18 songs on this? It's a long disc. It's hard to, I don't want to knock a band for giving us more. I mean, if you want to give me 40 minutes of music or 110 minutes of music, I guess I'll take the 110. But I think that was the one thing I had was I'd listen, I'd get maybe through 8 or 9 tracks, and then I'd want to go to something else. But I think, Pete, you mentioned Turned. There's the, and I'm going to say this wrong, but is it Edelgeiss almost reminded me of Tubular Bells. It kind of had that sound to it and that vibe to it. Forced to Be Happy, some great country licks in that track. So I felt like, you know, this guitar player was pretty diverse. He kind of touched on a bunch of different things. I really love this combination. But like I said, I think there was something to this that whether it's too long, it just kind of wore on me after a while. I like I said, I think my critique of this record would be I had trouble getting through the entire album. But I do enjoy listening to it. I know they had some, George, they have something that was released this year as well, right? Because this was 2021. I haven't listened to the new one, but I plan on doing that. It's terrific. I mean, and I thought the interplay, there's a lot of great bass stuff in this too. Those little, what is it, the Unidentified Man, they're kind of those breakup where there's like a minute or a minute and a half pieces that kind of break up the songs. But
Interludes, they call them, I think.
yeah,
right?
the interludes. But there's some really cool, like I think the first one, I think there's 4 of them. But there's some great guitar stuff. I mean, it might only go like a minute, but it's almost like they're just like blowing off steam. Like, let's run the tape. We'll play something for a minute and go on from there. But if the vibes, if you're into that at all, this band would be for you, I'm sure, because it's very prominent. The guitar is there, and I think, you know, the rest of the band. Pete, you mentioned the drumming. And they use some different tonalities in the drums too. It almost sounds like there's some, and George, I know you're a drummer, so you could pick up on it. There's some different snare sounds on this. I think I was picking up, like whether it's the effect on the snare or different types of snares they're using, but there's definitely some different tonalities going on in the drum tracks from song to song. But really cool band. I definitely check them out.
Colin, what you got next?
Number 3 is going to be Crosswind for me. It was number 4, but it's kind of risen a bit in the last week, mainly because this stuff is so melodic. I mean, the guitar playing is off the charts insane. I mean, his tone and his grab him by the balls attack, you know, he's nonstop. It is very much of its time, late 70s, you know, the bass has got a lot of flanger on it. There's a lot of that 70s era popping stuff. I'm looking at my notes here, you know, there's that Nagai Rail, I think is the name of the tune, where there's a section straight off a weather report, like No Mystery or something. It's like a unison runs, you know, descending unison runs. Reminded me of early Return to Forever, rather. Did I say weather report? I think I said weather report. Yeah. Okay, I meant Return to Forever. Yeah, I mean, it's got a little, you know, Japanese fusion of that era, including Prism and Cassiopeia too, to some degree. They've got a little bit of that smooth thing happening. It's kind of inevitable. But I think a lot of the late 70s British and American fusion was also tending a little bit that way too. I think bands that started in the early 70s, by the time you're at, 78, this was done. I don't have a physical copy of this either. I've just been kind of listening on YouTube. the YouTube version has 2 live versions of the songs on the studio album that are also definitely show that this guitarist is on fire, whether he's in the studio or not. He's burning. And I just thought it was, it was really melodic. The more I listened to it, the more I was really taken with the melodies, and all great players, of course. So that's number 3 for me. Pretty killer. And I had never heard it before this. So I always love it when I discover something, especially something from the 70s that I've never heard before. It's great fun.
Pete, where are you headed?
I'm gonna go with Gamalon for number 3. And as I was telling the guys before we started taping, I have that on CD, but I have not been able to find it for weeks. So while we were talking, I just ordered a copy of that and the second album for $5 each. So they're on their way to me. So yes. Anyway, Gamelon. Yeah, I first got turned on to this album back in the I'm gonna say late 90s. My late friend Grant, who just passed away about a month ago, he went to school up in Buffalo, and then he came back downstate, and actually we started working together, and he told me about this great instrumental band from Buffalo called Gamalon, and I went out and bought a copy of it, and I was pretty blown away by it. Really good. I agree with everything that Eric said about the production. It's of its time, right? It's got that kind of dated sound, but man, the 2 guitar players are just totally rocking on this thing. I mean, Billy Saloon is just so good. Listening to this again recently after not hearing it for a while, it just brought me back to when I first heard this album. Really, really good. The King is good, ferocious soloing on it. There's a lot of groove on Black Licorice. Cabin 14's got a blazing solo. I like the aggressive vibe of Souvenirs, and then that really sublime Anthony Ferraro piano comes in, and it just really gives it a nice little bit of variety in there. For me, Jungle Fever is kind of throwaway. Ooh Babe is nice and melodic and pleasant, but not one of the best on here. I think overall it's a killer album. Maybe not as mind-blowingly great as when I first heard it all those years ago, but I still think it's really, really good. And I'm looking forward to having it back again. You know what's going to happen. As soon as I get that new copy, I'm going to find my old one at some point. So that's the way it always works.
I'll take it, Pete. If
it does turn up, I will pass it on to you, Eric, for sure.
$5. $5.
Do you guys have, I heard that they got a violin player. Was he on the second record, or is it beyond that?
I think beyond.
It is beyond the second. So the second still has the same 2 guitar players?
Yeah, aerial view, right? Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's a must have too then. I'm assuming.
And there was a guitarist named Nori Bucci who played with them later on in their career, who is she's a smoking unknown guitar player. So if you haven't heard of her, checked her out. I can't.
How is she? Has she done anything with anybody else? Have you?
I don't know much about her other than that I would associate her with Gamelon, and I think she was on later albums, which I don't have, but I've seen some YouTube videos of her, and she's burning. So
Yeah.
You know who she is, George. Yeah, you've checked her out.
I've seen the YouTube stuff, and man, she can play.
Yeah.
George knows.
I don't know if she's on any studio albums.
I don't think she is. Yeah.
Oh,
The studio albums ended in 97, and if there's anything after that, I think it's just live stuff. Maybe she's on that. All right. 3. Oops. Doesn't help to do that. Come on. Swell.
Lay of Game, George.
What is it?
The Lay of Game.
Yeah.
Ah,
All right, my number 3 is Gamelon. This one is interesting. When I started getting into fusion in the earlier part of the 80s, where I'm following all the recommendations from people that I know. So it's not till around this time that I'm starting to feel like I know enough to maybe find something on my own, right? So being a rock and metal guy, when I see this album, it's like got the rock font with the rock artwork, and there's 2 guitars. I'm like, but then I hear it's fusion. I'm like, oh, I got to get this, And sure enough, you get it, and it is a rocked up fusion album. These guitar players, they got a rocked out tone. They're both obviously Di Meola aficionados. They're running all those lines like that. Particularly the first song with Billy Saloon. The two guys are doing trades, smoking. I'm pure smoke. My favorite tunes though are probably Cabin 14 and Souvenirs. Like Pete said, smoking piano solo on Souvenirs. I mean, that one really struck me. That's like that guy's moment on the album. I got the second album too. It's right close to it. Maybe not quite as good, but it's really good. When this first started, I had this in my head as the 4 because I hadn't played it in a while, and I thought that was because I was kind of iffy on it. But what it is I just hadn't played it in a while, so I didn't remember how good it actually was. And when I compared it directly with Crosswind, I just feel like the low point is a little less so than the Crosswind. I feel it's a little more of a consistent listen. I can put it on and just let it ride. But as usual, it's splitting hairs. So what do you got for 2, Eric?
I'm going with Crosswind. That Genji Ogawa, he just killed me. I love the rock vibe. I think there's a looseness to this. Like Cone, I was listening to this on YouTube. I was not smart enough to pick up a copy when Ken put it out there. But I absolutely fell in love with the guitar playing on this. And in addition to that, I think it just has that classic 70s vibe with the electric keys. They're all over it as well. There's some great unison runs. Cone, I don't know which YouTube one you were listening to, but I had trouble getting the actual names of these tracks.
Oh yeah.
So I'm
All
not going to
Japanese.
name names for the tracks. But I thought the first track has an excellent guitar. I love the tempo change that happens in that track. It kind of speeds up and comes back. Guitar absolutely goes for broke. Even the mellow stuff. And I know what you're saying, George, that they kind of lay back maybe a little bit more. But I just thought this guy was terrific. I loved listening to his playing. Like I said, I think it's got that rock attitude, but it definitely has the fusion vibe going to it. I was absolutely blown away. I'm kicking myself that I didn't pick up a copy when Ken put it out there, and he always lets us know when he's got something, and I didn't get it. You guys beat me to it. But I love that combination. And just those key, and then I'm not discounting what's going on with the drums and bass, but just that Rhodes sound and the guitar, and just that they really kick it up. I like having that rock vibe go along with the, obviously that the level of musicianship that's going on in a fusion band. I just think it's terrific. I got to find these. We talked about that before we went live, that they're not out there. You can't find them, but I will keep searching for this one. I thought it's terrific. And I think, what did they have? Kind of the same thing, like a 4 or 5 album run. Is that kind of where they sit?
I saw 3 studio and then like a 30-year break and then 2 live.
Is there 2 live? Okay. So that's, I knew I saw some other stuff out there. So
yeah, the 3 kind of came out in succession. I have all 3 of them, and they're
okay.
I mean, the first one I think is the best, but the second and third one are really good too. They were really good.
And to be fair, Eric, if we bought everything Ken pushed, we'd all be broke.
We'd have no money left, right?
That's very true.
What do you got, Cone?
Number 2, huh? Helmet of Gnats is the number 2 for me. This I stumbled upon. I think I was on Progressive Years and somebody mentioned them. And I think Chris Fox, the guitar player, is over there on Progressive Years, sometimes posts. I think he's also been a guest here, right? If I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
But I didn't hear this album first. I heard the second self-titled album. And then I stumbled on this. And I mean, this is for a debut album. This is pretty amazing when, the compositional skill, the quality of the recording, and the playing, is just it's off the charts. I hear a lot of dregs, like the Deer Hunter and that tune, Ticks, Groove is Horrendous, I think it's called. A lot of Dregsy kind of vibe. Not so much Southern as the Dregs, but more like that kind of almost quasi-classical approach I hear. Also, in general, the whole thing reminds me quite a bit of the Electric Band in a lot of ways. Great tunes, great melodies, great playing. Interesting compositions for sure. And I think I like the second album a little more still than this debut, but this debut album is climbed the charts for me. So it's, again, all four of these albums are, it's splitting hairs, but this is the number 2 for me.
The second one's actually called Time Slip.
Oh, that's right. Time Slip. There was another.
People thought it was self-titled because you can barely read where it says Time Slip.
Yeah, it's the one. It's got like the weird, like red orb thingy. Yeah. Okay. Time Slip.
And by the way, Chris Fox will be back on the show in February. So
Cool.
People should tune in for that. Where are you at for 2, Pete?
Can I do a tie for number 1, George? Please.
No.
It's not allowed, Pete. Not allowed.
Oh man, I can't pull a Pardo mulligan today. All right. Well, I'm going to go with Hellman and Gnats at number 2. I'm very familiar with most of their catalog, but I'd never heard this one before. And George was kind enough to send me a copy not that long ago. And yeah, this is great debut. I mean, it's really, really melodic, strong compositions. I agree with everything Cohen was saying about the kind of Electric Band and Dixie Dregs feel throughout this album. I mean, Giant Picnic, for crying out loud, sounds like a long lost Electric Band track from the late 80s. Really, really good. It's funky, it's energetic, it's got great melodies, great playing. And I think what I really like about this band always is that even though all the players are such virtuosos, it sounds like a nice, tight ensemble band. And that's really good. Like nobody's like, look at me type of thing, but they all shine, right? All shine together. Chris Fox is terrific. I like a song like Nathan's Deacon's Brain, which sounds like a Dregs tune off of like Odyssey to me, which I think is kind of cool. It's a little darker tone. Ticks in the Field is killer. Happy Camper's got a great melody to it. It's got that majestic, like Cole mentioned, like that kind of classical feel. Like when I listen to the Dregs, it's majestic music, whatever you want to call it, but it always sounds very majestic. These guys have captured that quite a bit. Jesus Horrendous might be my favorite song on here. Complete face melter. I think the guitars are cranked up, the piano's awesome. Deer Hunter's really good, and the closing track is also really, really good. Night Fighter rips too. I don't know. I mean, this is like one of those great fusion albums that nobody ever talks about, right? Maybe because of the time it came out or whatever. But yeah, this could have easily been my number 1. I really struggle with my number 2 and number 1 because I really love them both equally. But something's got to go at number 2. So yeah, for today, we're going to go with Hellman and Gnats.
And it's another one pretty much unavailable as hard copies. They did a print run of 1,000, and that's 27 years ago now. So
Yeah,
you never even see one on Discogs. Actually, I asked Chris when he was on, he didn't have any. So it's my number 3 as well, or 2 as well. It was number 1 for a while, and then I ended up going back for reasons I'll elucidate later. But yeah, 1996, Giant Picnic, like you said, funky tune. Nathan Deacon's Brain is very Dregsy.
See, now you guys both said Dregs. Did you guys pick up any Crimson in that? I thought the guitar pattern was a little crimson-y if you go back and listen to it, like Discipline era between that and the keyboards. I got a little of that era King Crimson out of it.
I didn't, but I'm not surprised that all of us can hear different stuff all over this because they touch on a lot of touchstones. I don't think it's intentional, but they're just plowing the same fields as we all grew up on. My favorites are Ticks in the Field and The Happy Camper. Ticks kind of reminds me of Bruford, like something off of One of a Kind.
Ah,
Um, Happy's got a super infectious lead line that gets unisoned by him and the keyboard player. Memorable stuff. Um, like Pete said, Jesus Horrendous. That riff I hear a little almost like a Liquid Tension thing, kind of the lead riff in that song is kind of, Chris has got prog in his background as well, knowing him like we do. He's a progger, so it doesn't surprise me that he would come up with something like that. The Deer Hunter reminds me of one of those like Morse ballads, like Night Meets Light,
Yep.
something like that. One of those slow builders,
Yeah.
it's kind of moving around.
yeah.
Um, and then Night Fighters, I almost hear a little like a Sharinian vibe to that one. It's kind of weird, some of the stuff I was hearing on extended listens of this. I had this for about as long as it's been out, but again, I didn't get a hard copy at the time, and now we're all stuck with Burns. But I guess you got to give Ken credit. He always says, if you see something you want, get it when you see it, because
Learn your
these
lesson.
days,
Never know.
yeah. So, yeah, it's my number 2 by a slim margin. Although I will say that if you just want a good straight listen, good jams, no faults, this is the album. I mean, there's nothing to complain about here. Everything here is good. But for reasons I'll list later, it's not my number 1. What is yours, Eric?
That is my number 1. First of all, Chris, I want guitar lessons. Great tone. I want to know what you're using equipment wise. I loved his tone on this record. I was between him and the keyboards, there's a lot of unison stuff going on. Loved it. Great picnic, great funky opener. Again, that one has the unison lines. I know you guys mentioned Dregs for Nathan Deacon's Brain. I got a Crimson vibe out of that. Not that I don't hear the dregs going on, but I definitely got some Crimson vibe out of that. Happy Camper had that lighter feel to it, but again, same thing. And that had some really nice piano stuff going on in there. Deer Hunter had that kind of slow, contemplative, but I thought the keyboard and guitar stuff, and it was almost hypnotic the way that was kind of, those lines were running through. I think my 2 favorites are the opener and Night Fighters. I love the call and response in that. The unison lines in that are just unbelievable. Pete, you mentioned Jesus Horrendous. That's just killer.
Yeah.
Chris is terrific. I mean, I had Time Slip. That's the only other one I had by them. I plan on getting the other 2 one way or another. I didn't get to see them at Nearfest. I didn't attend that one the year that they played, but I got to tip my hat to Chris. Absolutely terrific playing on this again. And there are some times where he pulls back. The keyboards do come up front a lot. It's not all guitar, but he's terrific on this record, and that's usually my go-to. And he definitely fills that the guitar need for me on this record. So terrific stuff. I'm going with Helmet of Gnats at number 1.
Owen?
Number 1, if you haven't guessed it by now, Marriage Material. Marriage Material was probably in my top 10 releases at 2021, actually. And I hadn't listened to it in a little while, and I haven't heard the newer album yet. I plan to rectify that after spending a couple weeks listening to this again. The reason it's number 1, and maybe George is going to elucidate some of this stuff as well, but it is really and I think Pete said it, it's the most unique of these. It's the newest, but also they're doing something that's different. And I mean, the instrumentation is part of that for sure. What's interesting to me is that the vibe player, he's playing vibes, but he's also playing synth, mallet controlled synth, which I didn't realize when I first heard the album. And I've been watching videos in the last week or so. There's some videos of them out there that are worth checking out. And so that kind of enlightened me. There's no keyboards really on this. It's all vibes, bass, guitar, drums. Although there are some special guests on this album too, playing some other instruments, right? So
yeah,
I think I hear, we talk about influences, and I mean, I think none of us would say that any of the albums we're talking about today are derivatives. They're not copies of any earlier bands or anything. This one stands out to me as the least derivative, but I do have to say, like, that Remy Problemi tune reminds me very much of Zalinol, and maybe that's why it's number one on my list, because I'm a total Weather Report geek. And Betelgeuse or Betelgeuse, I don't know how you say that either, Eric. But that reminded me quite a bit of Steps Ahead, like middle period Steps Ahead, with Mike Maneri on the vibes, and just kind of the general vibe of it. So it's very diverse compositionally. It is a little long, and I get what people are saying, and I honestly don't think I ever listened to the whole album all the way through in one fell swoop either. So there is that to be said for it. The other thing is, Gary Burton was a particular hero of mine. I love Gary Burton, everything he did. And so to hear anybody play vibes in a kind of in a unique setting, I'm not saying this guy sounds like Gary Burton. I think every vibe player who's played after him is influenced by him. But compositionally, really interesting music. Kind of hard to pigeonhole some of this stuff. Definitely there are antecedents out there, but it strikes me as really unique. And they're a Berlin band, I think, except for the guitarist who's Finnish, I think, from Finland, if I remember right from what I read. And I can't wait to go out and buy the second album, actually. So they rise to the top for me.
Cool. Pete?
Crosswind. So it's funny because I was talking to Ken Golden today, actually, and he was asking which albums we're going to be talking about tonight. And I was explaining to him that when I bought those 3 Crosswind CDs from him all those months ago, they actually sat here for like almost 2 months before I even listened to them. And then when I played them, I was like, holy shit. It's like I have been sitting on these monster Japanese fusion albums for 2 months, and they just blew my mind. I mean, this album, and again, I've got the Japanese, obviously the Japanese copies, all the song titles are in Japanese. I loaded into iTunes, they all come up in Japanese. So I don't know what the hell any of these songs are titled, actually, but this is fiery, it's funky, it rocks. And this guitar player just absolutely blew my mind. I mean, to me, he does that alternate picking thing like Steve Morse, but obviously there's the whole Japanese influence, right? And it's so explosive at times. I mean, the first song is like a total ripper. I mean, this guy, you got this really nice synth and electric piano, and then all of a sudden the guitar just comes in, and it's just total smoke show, just absolutely amazing. The track 3, it's kind of airy like Weather Report, but then that guitar solo comes in, and it's just like, you're just like, holy cow, did he just do that? Track 5 gives me like a Jeff Beck, like Wired blow by blow type of feel to it, I think. There's another song later on, I think it's track number 7, where the whole band has this kind of like Caravanserai era Santana vibe to it, which I think is really cool. I'm a huge fan of that album. I don't know, there's some Brand X elements on here. It's just, I don't know. To me, I get the most wow moments from this, even though I think the Helmet of Gnats album is a little better compositionally, but this guitar player just blows me away. He's just so good, and it made this one my number 1.
Yeah, it's funny. I was looking around. I have files of the first 2 albums, and so whoever uploaded them or whatever, they have translated titles. So I started looking around the web. I can't find those translated titles anywhere else. I mean, nowhere. I don't know if the guy knew Japanese, or he could just be bullshitting. It could be nonsense.
Possibly,
Yeah, right.
Possibly.
I think the YouTube video has Japanese and then English
It does.
translations for all the tunes. That's where I found it. And I just I did a little, studio trickery with the YouTube video and made a CD of it. So as
My
I'm
number
sure
one is Marriage Material by Cone. It was in my top 5 that year. 2021 was in my top 5 that year. I went and looked at the forum. I couldn't remember where I had it, but yeah, I had it in my top 5. Like Pete said, I'm going to sound like Eric here, but I'm just totally taken with the drumming. I can't get past it. Felix Lehrman is like Dennis Chambers Jr. He's these drum parts, especially the first couple tunes, Tony's Tears and The Other Side. These drum parts really, really are next level. They're so cool. They kind of carry the tunes in a way, but it's the way he goes with the other guys. The mallets is a strength, but I do agree that at 72 minutes and 18 songs, it tails off. The last 5 tunes are, it's you're at the point where you're like, okay, I'm kind of done with it a little bit. that is an issue, but I'm willing to overlook it for the good stuff on here. Besides Tony Tears and The Other Side, Remy Problemi, that's another great tune. Really nice. I think that is a keyboard solo. I don't know if it's mallet controlled, but it's listed in the credits as a keyboard solo. You got some guests on here like Ken Cohn mentioned. You got Kurt Rosenwinkel playing a guitar solo on Flowers in Her Hair. Really cool liquidy solo from him, kind of long. He's a guy that I don't really have in my collection much. I think he does a lot of straight ahead stuff, but that's a really cool solo.
Get Stars of Jupiter. I think that's the name of the album. Star of Jupiter or Stars of Jupiter. Get that album. Oh yeah. It's yeah, he does a lot of straight ahead stuff, but he burns fusion too. And that one in particular is really quirky and cool. Recommend for me for sure.
Then you got a couple of brothers on Beetlejuice. You got the Wasserfurs guesting on trumpet and piano. I never heard of those guys. I saw on Bandcamp they got a bunch of albums. I don't know what their stuff is like, but their soloing on here really adds to that track. Lizard Party kind of sounds like a spy movie to me. Nice bass solo there from Thomas Steiger. But yeah, you get to Sweet Rain, and it's like it's too long and a little too static down the stretch. But I'm willing to ignore it because just the early stuff really captivates me. And like Cone said, out of these, it is the most different one. And sometimes I go with that. I don't know. It's all very subjective. That's my number one. If you're thinking about the new one, Cone, it is 8 songs and a half hour shorter. So
there you go.
They listen to us.
yeah,
Yes.
that is taken care of.
Yes, but are there any vocals?
No vocals.
Okay then.
There's
Run
one
right
track.
track. Sounds like a winner.
There's one track that's a sequel, a track on this debut. So
Oh, cool.
pretty cool stuff. All right, George's pick. A band called the Four Corners. They are out of Georgia in the US. They are a quartet, standard guitar, bass, drums, keys. This is a 2014 release. What'd you think, Eric?
Loved it. I think what I got from this one, very lyrical guitar playing. It's not a chops fest. Not that he doesn't get to blow every once in a while, but I thought the songs were terrific. The guitar playing was out of this world, completely in my wheelhouse. Again, the opener, What a Ride, just great lines. And I thought, I don't know if I'm putting it in the right words. I felt like his playing, like we talk about vocals and we joke, but that guitar playing was like vocalizing. I mean, I just thought there's great melodies that are carried by the guitar. Again, you get that Rhodes sound in a couple of the songs. I think Eighth Element, the Rose really comes out in that one. But the only thing that bothered me about this was I had this was another one that I was going out and looking for, and I saw the other album they have. So is it like this one? I think was 2016. This is their second, or is this their first?
First.
This is a debut 2014. The second one's 2016.
Because of the show, I'm wanting to listen to that, and I didn't go and listen to the first one. So I've got to go back and check that one out. And I hate when I have stuff that's digital because I always forget that it's out there. So this is one I wrote down. I'm like, I got to remember to go back and listen to that first record. You know, and again, they kind of go back and forth. I think the song "The Coming" is one that kind of pulls back a little bit. It's a little more laid back. But then Dreamland comes back. That's funky again. Keeps pushing that guitar forward. I thought these guys were absolutely terrific. I think the biggest disappointment was I went to you and I'm like, are these guys done? And you had mentioned you saw they have a couple like single releases in 2021 or something, but no full album. But you did say it looks like their website is still active or somewhat active. So hopefully they're still around and doing stuff, and maybe we'll get some more from them. But this, I think, if and again, that's what I fall back on. But if you enjoy guitar in this genre, these guys are a must. You got to hear them because this is absolutely great playing. Nothing is showy, but it's all there. It's all laid out for you. So I love this.
Where were you at on it, Cone?
Yeah, this one is also a great album, great band. Another one that my friend Rob turned me on to. I think he heard them and was checking them out on some streaming or radio, Fusion Radio, internet radio station, and he picked it up and sent me some copy of it, and I was blown away. I had never heard him.
Waxman?
Yeah, Rob Waxman, absolutely. Lives 3 blocks away from me. So yeah, I mean everything Eric said. I think it's really musical. It's not a chops fest, although all these guys can play anything. I hear a lot of the classic kind of Return to Forever, and even a little bit of like Jean-Luc Ponty, early Jean-Luc Ponty stuff in the compositions, but it's not derivative at all. The quality of the recording is great. All the instruments sound really great. It's another band that it's really fun to go out on the internet and watch videos of, because there's a lot of studio recordings, videos of studio recordings, and these guys are smoking. I got this, I think maybe a year after it came out, and listened to it a while, and then it kind of faded from my radar. So I'm glad to revisit it again. And it's another one where I'm like, okay, I better go check out what they've been doing since then. So time to break out the wallet. Checkbook, credit card.
Where you have it on it, Pete?
I love this. God, it's a long time ago. My buddy Greg from Boise, Idaho. Greg, if you're watching, what's going on? He sent me a link to a YouTube video. There's one of those performance videos in the studio that Cone was talking about. And I remember being really impressed by it. But then, you got a million things going on, and you just kind of forget about it. In fact, I don't even think they had, I don't remember if the album was out at the time, or maybe because they didn't have a CD, it was only digital. I just didn't give it much thought, and whatever. So it was great to kind of like go and hear this whole thing. And man, these guys are really, really good, really tight. I love the production of the album. It just sparkles with life. I get some big Electric Band and Return to Forever kind of feels throughout the whole thing, which not a bad thing in my book. The guitar tone of this guy is killer. The synths are killer. The drumming is killer. Road to Eternity, just love that song. Really, really good. What a Ride. What a ride that is, man. That's a killer track. Eighth Element is great. Love the guitar solo on that. Dreamland, It's kind of catchy, atmospheric, right? A little bit different feel on that one. And Primera Canción, killer, absolutely killer. After I went and listened to this for a little bit, I searched all over the internet to see if I could find this or the album that came after it on physical, and there's none to be had. So I purchased the digital of both of them. I was like, screw it, I gotta have this in whatever format I can get it in. So yeah, great stuff. I could almost say that I enjoyed this even more than the albums in the Foursquare. That's how much I like this. But they're all great albums today. This is 5 really good albums today.
Yeah, I got this in time. The time it came out, and my first impression was Electric Band. I heard the melodic lines, like compositions of Electric Band, and separately the keyboard player with the Rhodes and stuff. You could tell he's a Chick head, big time.
Yeah.
He's not a soloist like Chick. I don't find him. He's burning it up a lot. He's more of a comping player, but he's really good when he does solo. I would say the first 3, What a Ride, Road to Eternity, and Eighth Element. I mean, boom, boom, boom. I mean, you just punched in the face. Those are so good. It doesn't really slip at all. I guess maybe the only track that's a little bit off the mark would be Soul Redemption. You can kind of hear the title, and that could be a little soft, but it's cool soft. It's a good one. Second album, Portals of Gold, just about as good, I would say. I wouldn't say there's any slip there. Was out briefly as a hard copy on Rope-a-Dope, but I haven't seen anywhere in a long time. So again, something I could have got in time and I didn't.
Didn't do it.
No, stupid, but yeah. The drummer just did put out some solo stuff. I saw a video link, but I didn't look into what it is, if it's a single or if it's an album. So I don't know if that's a good sign or a bad sign that he's doing something else. Maybe it's just while he's waiting around for the band to get it together, or he posted it on the band's Facebook page. So I take it everybody's on board. So I don't know, but he's a real good player. He's got the kind of coming from that gospel chops background, the super tight snare, the really fast hands. Like Cone said, there's good videos of them playing in the studio. You can see just how much the guy rips. He's really good. But yeah, I was pretty confident with this one that it would go over well, but you never know. I mean, it's maybe a little less. It's not like a hard charger. It's more in a chill manner, but it does boil intensity. So I figured it would go over well.
You did well, George.
Yeah.
It's great.
Cool. George, you want to give anybody a hint of kind of what to expect in January? Well, January is recap, right?
Yeah, we're doing our 2023 wrap. The top CDs of the year. A show Colin was on, our last year's version of it. This year we're bringing Len Davis in, another guy that, to put it mildly, follows the scene very, very closely. So he's going to be on top of, I'm sure, have a great list and give us a chance to come up with good lists ourselves. And repeating a feature from last year that everybody liked, the George's pick is going to be a compilation CD that the boys got today.
Yep.
So that'll be something that I'll do another YouTube playlist as the date draws near. Yeah, there it is.
Yes.
So everyone tune in for that for sure. So you know what to get.
So for everybody watching, you got 4 in the Foursquare today to go and listen to, and let us know what you think down in the comments below. I would highly recommend you go check out that 5th album too, The Four Corners, George's pick. That's pretty damn special too. So you got 5 really good albums here to go investigate for those of you who haven't heard any of these before. And I want to thank Colin for joining us once again. It's always good to see him on the show. I'm sure we'll be seeing him in the not too distant future. And what do you got there? Night Watch?
That's the Janet Gwizdala from the new releases. I forgot to put it up.
Cool.
Cover up.
And we'll list everything in the comments below as always, so you guys can just kind of copy and paste and go out and search and listen and all that good stuff. So Thanks for watching, everybody, for this December edition of 4Fusion Friday, finishing out 2023. Visit us on the web at www.seatranquility.org. We're on Facebook, we're on YouTube, all together, all the damn
All the
time.
damn
And,
time.
Please subscribe if you haven't already, and click on that notification bell so you get alerted of all of our content as it posts. And please do hit the like button before you leave. Have a good one, everybody. Enjoy your weekend. We got coming up on the channel tomorrow. Of course, the UK connection's happening tomorrow with Simon and Steven. And then for all you Jazz and Fusion fans, coming up on Sunday, very special show. Mike Antonelli is coming back on SOT for the first time in a number of years, and we will finally be ranking our top 10 albums from the great John Coltrane. That's happening on Sunday. So stay tuned for that and lots more. For Eric, George, and Cone. Oh,
what about next week? We got a show for diffusers too. Me and you.
that's right. Next week, so it's actually December 1st. So all November, I was counting down my favorite rock solo albums of all time. And I remember at the beginning of my life, I took out all the fusion solo albums. Well, George and I are going to come back next week, and we're going to each count down our favorite 20 jazz fusion solo records of all time. So that's coming up next week. So stay tuned for that. So thank you for reminding me, George. I can't remember all these damn shows. I got the olds. Thank you, Chris Allo, for that. Thanks. Tune into that. We also got a very special show coming up. Let's see. In a week and a half on In the Prague Seat, we're doing another album study, and we're going to be talking about When Dream and Day Unite, the debut album from Dream Theater. There's also, and not only is it an album study, but it's also kind of a little tribute to the late Charlie Dominici, who just passed away recently. And joining us for that episode, it's confirmed as of today, Mike Portnoy will be joining us on that one. So it'll be great to have Mike, who's now back in Dream Theater, talking about that first Dream Theater album and giving us some thoughts on Charlie as well. So stay tuned for that. For Eric, George, and Cole, I am Pete Pardo. Have a good one, everybody. Enjoy your weekend. See you soon. Bye-bye.